In the marble foyer of Julian Remington's mansion, respect isn't earned, it's demanded. Every morning, the billionaire orders Lila Carter, his black housekeeper, to kneel, convinced she's just another invisible worker whose dignity can be quietly stripped away. He believes she'll swallow the ritual, like so many before her, to keep her job. What he doesn't see is her iron will, meticulous mind, and a family she'd burn the world to protect. When his 6-year-old son shouts, "Stop!" and the moment is captured forever, Julian ignites a battle he can't control, and Lila won't back down from. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Through the towering glass doors of the Remington townhouse, morning light spilled across the marble floor in long, cold rectangles. Lila Carter adjusted the crisp collar of her black and white uniform, her fingers brushing against the starched fabric as she took her place in line with 3 other staff members. The foyer's polished surfaces reflected their silent formation like a mirror, doubling the weight of the moment. Julian Remington stood at the base of the curved staircase, his tailored suit as sharp as his expression. His shoes clicked against the marble as he approached, each step deliberate and measured. The security guard positioned himself near the door, arms crossed, watching with practiced indifference. "Good morning," Julian announced, his voice carrying the artificial warmth of a corporate presentation. "As you know, our courtesy protocol is a cherished house tradition." He paused, his eyes fixing on Lila. "Ms. Carter, if you would demonstrate proper respect." Elena Ortiz, the senior housekeeper, kept her gaze firmly fixed on the floor, her shoulders tense. Lila could feel Elena's discomfort radiating beside her, mixed with a familiar resignation that filled the space like a heavy fog. Lila's heart pounded, but her face remained calm as she stepped forward. 6 months of this ritual had taught her to compartmentalize, to separate her dignity from this performance. She noted every detail, the exact spot where the morning light hit the floor, the way Julian's voice carried a hint of satisfaction, the time on the grandfather clock reading 7:45 a.m. The marble was cold and hard against her knees as she lowered herself down. She kept her spine straight, refusing to bow her head completely. In her mind, she repeated Julian's exact words, storing them away like evidence. Demonstrate proper respect. House tradition. The silence stretched out, broken only by the tick of the grandfather clock. Julian stood before her, his expensive shoes inches from her knees, when a small sound drew everyone's attention to the hallway. Theo Remington appeared, a tiny figure in blue dinosaur pajamas. His dark curls were still mussed from sleep, and he clutched a red crayon in his small fist. He stopped at the edge of the foyer, his eyes growing wide as he took in the scene before him. For months since his mother's death, Theo had barely spoken above a whisper. He moved through the house like a shadow, responding to questions with nods or shakes of his head. But now, seeing Lila on her knees before his father, something changed in his expression. "Stop!" The word exploded through the foyer, sharp and clear as breaking glass. It bounced off the marble floors and high ceilings, seeming to echo in the sudden stillness that followed. Julian's body went rigid. His face, usually controlled and confident, drained of color. The security guard shifted uncomfortably, and Elena's hand flew to her throat in surprise. Lila lifted her head slowly, deliberately meeting Julian's stunned gaze. His eyes were wide, almost vulnerable, as if Theo's voice had cracked something in his carefully maintained facade. She didn't look away, didn't flinch. In that moment, the power dynamic in the room shifted like a sudden change in air pressure. The silence stretched for several heartbeats, broken only by the sound of Theo's crayon hitting the marble floor and rolling away. Julian swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. "That's Julian cleared his throat, his voice unusually rough. "That's enough for this morning. Everyone return to your duties. There will be a staff meeting at noon to reset expectations." The staff dispersed quickly and quietly, like leaves scattered by a sudden wind. Lila rose smoothly to her feet, brushing off her knees with deliberate movements. Her hands trembled slightly as she walked to the laundry room, but her steps were steady. Once alone in the laundry room, surrounded by the familiar smell of detergent and warm cotton, Lila pulled out her phone. Her fingers shook as she typed out a quick note. 7:45 a.m. JP demanded kneeling as proper respect and house tradition. Theo shouted, "Stop." Meeting called for noon. She added the date and pressed save. She gripped the edge of the folding table, taking deep breaths of the warm, clean-scented air. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a dryer tumbled rhythmically. Lila focused on these ordinary sounds as her heartbeat gradually steadied. Elena entered quietly, closing the door behind her. Her experienced eyes took in Lila's trembling hands and rigid posture. "Sit down, Mahita," Elena said softly, pulling out a metal chair. "Take a moment." Lila sank into the chair, grateful for Elena's steady presence. "How long?" she asked. "How long has he been making staff kneel?" Elena's weathered face tightened. "Daily, for years, since before Theo's mother passed." She glanced at the door, then moved to a tall cabinet in the corner. From behind a stack of clean towels, she pulled out a thick black binder. "Here, page 32. Lila opened the staff handbook, its pages crisp and official. There it was in black and white. Courtesy Protocol. Her stomach churned as she read the detailed requirements for showing proper respect through traditional gestures of deference. Without hesitation, Lila pulled out her phone. She photographed the page carefully, making sure the timestamp and date were visible in the corner of her screen. She took multiple shots, including the handbook's cover and table of contents. "Be careful," Elena whispered, but her eyes showed approval. "I always am," Lila replied, tucking her phone away securely. Later that morning, Lila went upstairs to clean Theo's room. The boy sat cross-legged on his carpet, surrounded by crayons and paper. His small face was serious as he worked on a drawing, pressing hard with the red crayon to create a bold stop sign. Lila's heart squeezed as she watched him. He hadn't spoken since his outburst in the foyer, retreating back into his usual silence. As she dusted his bookshelf, a soft buzzing sound caught her attention. The sleek smartwatch on Theo's wrist lit up with a gentle pulse. Lila recognized it as part of his school's new safety program. All the first graders wore them. As she moved closer to collect his laundry, she noticed the watch's screen showing a settings menu. The words "Auto Upload Enabled" and "Safety Alert Logged" blinked quietly in one corner. A soft knock at the door made them both look up. Darren Cho, the house's IT administrator, stood in the doorway with his tablet. "Just checking the wireless signals," he said casually. But his eyes met Lila's with purpose. Lila followed him into the hallway, where he lowered his voice. "I heard about what happened this morning. There's something you should know." He glanced around before continuing. Theo's shout triggered 2 automatic recordings, one from his watch, one from the house system. Both uploaded to our secure cloud storage for child safety incidents. Lila's breath caught. "And those recordings are time-stamped and protected," Darren confirmed. His fingers moved across his tablet. "But here's the interesting part. There's a mirror backup that syncs to a separate server. It's tied to Mrs. Remington's estate trust. Mr. Remington can't access it directly." Before Lila could respond, footsteps approached. Julian appeared, his earlier sharpness dulled by something that looked almost like uncertainty. He paused at Theo's door, watching his son draw. No more rituals, Julian announced quietly, as if making a generous concession. We'll find other ways to maintain proper respect. Lila kept her face neutral, but inside, a small flame of hope flickered to life. For the first time, she'd seen Julian rattled, seen evidence preserved beyond his reach. The morning crept toward noon. Staff members began gathering in the formal dining room, their shoes quiet on the thick carpet. Lila checked her phone one last time, confirming the handbook photos were safely stored. She straightened her uniform, squared her shoulders, and walked into the room with measured steps. The massive mahogany table gleamed under crystal chandeliers, the chairs arranged with precise symmetry. Other staff members found their places, their movements careful and contained. Elena caught Lila's eye with a subtle nod as they took their seats. Lila's phone rested in her pocket, a solid reminder of the morning's documentation. The handbook photos, Darren's revelation about the recordings, Theo's unexpected intervention, pieces were falling into place. She folded her hands on the polished table surface and waited, her posture straight but relaxed, ready for whatever the meeting might bring. The grandfather clock in the hallway began to strike 12, its deep tones resonating through the house. Footsteps approached the dining room, and the staff fell silent, waiting for their employer to begin his reset of expectations. The dining room's heavy silence was broken by the click of expensive shoes on marble. Julian entered, followed by a slim woman in a crisp pantsuit, his new PR director. Behind them, catering staff wheeled in covered silver trays that released tempting aromas. "Friends," Julian began, his voice warm and practiced, "I want to address this morning's misunderstanding." He gestured expansively. Sometimes traditions can become distorted over time. What was meant as a symbol of mutual respect clearly needs updating for modern sensibilities. The PR director smiled professionally while distributing thick manila envelopes to each staff member. "Mr. Remington wants to make this right," she explained. "We're offering improved compensation packages and quarterly bonuses." Elena caught Lila's eye across the table, her expression carefully neutral. They both knew raises didn't come without strings. Lila opened her envelope and began reading the legal document inside. The language was dense, but certain phrases jumped out. Non-disclosure of internal culture and customs, confidentiality regarding workplace traditions and protocols, binding agreement not to discuss or document staff practices. "Take your time," Julian said smoothly, as waiters served elegant plates of grilled salmon and roasted vegetables. "But we'd like to resolve this today. Start fresh." Lila set down her fork. "I'd like to review this at home, if that's all right. Maybe have a lawyer look it over?" The PR director's smile tightened. "We prefer to handle these matters internally, in the moment. It builds trust." "Your phone, please," a gruff voice demanded. The security contractor loomed over Lila's chair, hand extended. "No personal devices during HR discussions. You people need to learn about proper workplace boundaries." The racial undertone in his voice made several staff members stiffen. Layla kept her voice steady. "This is my personal property. I'm not required to surrender it." "Now listen here," the guard started, reaching for her pocket. "That won't be necessary," Julian interrupted smoothly, though his eyes had hardened. "Lila can take time to think things over. We're all friends here." The guard withdrew, but remained hovering nearby as the uncomfortable lunch continued. Staff ate mechanically, the fancy food tasting like cardboard. The PR director kept up a stream of cheerful corporate speak about fresh starts and moving forward together. When they were finally dismissed, Lila headed for the service hallway. Darren fell into step beside her, speaking in low tones. "The audio file from this morning? It's already backed up to Mrs. Remington's trust server," he murmured. "Different system, different permissions. He can't touch it. Lila's steps steadied. You're sure? Positive. The trust's lawyers set it up after she died. Wanted Theo's records preserved independently. Julian doesn't have direct access. Hope bloomed in Lila's chest, but she kept her face composed as she finished her afternoon tasks. The handbook photos felt like they were burning a hole in her pocket. Everything mattered now. Every detail. Every timestamp. Every witness. In the staff locker room at shift's end, Lila carefully transferred the photos to her secure cloud storage. Then she pulled out the small notebook she always carried and wrote down everything from the day in precise detail. Times, locations, exact quotes. She'd learned young that memory wasn't enough. You needed documentation. She changed out of her uniform with methodical movements, mind racing behind her calm exterior. The unsigned NDA felt like both a threat and an opportunity. Julian's mask had slipped, revealing the force he'd used to maintain control. At her locker, Elena squeezed her shoulder in silent support before heading out. Other staff avoided eye contact, already choosing sides. Lila clocked out exactly on time, neither rushing nor dawdling. The security guard watched her leave, but she kept her pace measured, her expression neutral. Only when she was safely on the bus did she let her shoulders relax slightly. Through the window, she watched the wealthy neighborhood recede, giving way to more modest areas. Her phone buzzed with a text from Mason. Maid mac and cheese. Save you some? A small smile touched her lips as she typed back, Be home soon. Homework done? The bus swayed around a corner, and Lila gripped her bag containing the notebook and photos. Her mind kept returning to Theo's clear young voice saying, Stop! And to Darren's revelation about the backup server beyond Julian's reach. For the first time, she felt like maybe the truth could win against money and power. The familiar streets of her neighborhood appeared, and Lila pulled the cord for her stop. In her apartment, Mason would be waiting with his homework spread across their small kitchen table, probably sneaking extra cheese when he thought she wasn't looking. The thought steadied her as she stood, holding the overhead rail, ready to step down into the early evening air. The kitchen felt warm and familiar as Lila stirred the pot of spaghetti, letting Nina Simone's velvet voice wash over her from the old radio. Mason sat at their small table, pencil tapping against his math homework. Everything okay, Aunt Lila? He asked, looking up from his fractions. You're quieter than usual. Lila managed a soft smile. Work was hard today, baby, but we're going to be fine. She tasted the sauce, adding a pinch more oregano. I promise, I'll always protect our home. I know you will, Mason said with the simple faith of a 12-year-old who'd never seen his aunt break a promise. The doorbell's harsh buzz made them both jump. A courier stood outside with 2 thick envelopes marked Urgent. Sign here, he said flatly, holding out an electronic pad. Lila's hands were steady as she opened the first envelope. The Remington corporate letterhead gleamed expensively. Notice of immediate suspension pending investigation. Workplace conduct and policy violations. The second envelope contained another copy of the NDA, plus a letter strongly encouraging her to sign by tomorrow morning. Lila filed both carefully in a manila folder, her grandmother's voice echoing in her head. Keep everything. Paper tells the truth, when people won't. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Anonymous social media accounts were sharing posts about a disruptive housekeeper who had traumatized a grieving child. The comments were getting ugly fast. The phone rang. Elena's number. Lila? Elena's voice was strained. Jessica and Kim signed the NDAs an hour ago. They were scared about their visas. She paused. I'm so sorry. Don't be, Lila said firmly. They have to protect themselves. She lowered her voice, moving away from Mason. Have you heard anything else? Just that Julian's lawyers are involved now. Be careful, Mija. After they hung up, Lila called the legal aid number she'd saved months ago, just in case. The paralegal listened carefully to her story. You need Evelyn Hargrove, she said decisively. She's handled cases like this before. Workplace discrimination, retaliation. I'll email you her contact information. Thank you, Lila said, writing down the details. Her phone pinged with a text from an unknown number. Darren here. Maid secure email, address. Check it in 10 mins. Delete this. She deleted the message, then served Mason his spaghetti. How are those fractions coming? Almost done, he said around a mouthful of pasta. Can we watch that space documentary later? Let me check my email first. Then, absolutely. The burner email contained detailed instructions for accessing metadata from Theo's uploaded audio file. Timestamps, file hashes, server logs. But the second paragraph made her catch her breath. Found something else. After incident with previous nanny. Suspected abuse. Never proven. Misses. Our Maid Trust maintain independent backups of all child safety alerts. System logs show multiple staff complaints about kneeling protocol affecting Theo. Everything's preserved on Trust server. Julian can't delete or alter. Lila created a new folder labeled Documentation and methodically saved everything. The suspension notice, social media screenshots, Darren's technical instructions, the handbook photos. Each item carefully dated and organized. She was just closing her laptop when 3 sharp knocks echoed through the apartment. Mason looked up, startled. Through the peephole, Lila saw a woman in a blazer holding up a badge. Her stomach dropped. Ms. Carter, Child Protective Services. We need to speak with you regarding an urgent complaint. Lila opened the door, keeping her voice steady. Good evening. How can I help you? The social worker was professional but direct. We've received an anonymous report expressing concerns about household stability and potential endangerment of your ward, Mason Carter. I need to schedule a formal interview for tomorrow morning. Mason had gone very still at the table. Lila felt her heart hammering but kept her face calm. Of course, she said evenly. What time would work best? They settled on 9 a.m. The social worker handed her a form detailing the complaint. Guardian displays erratic behavior, emotional instability, inappropriate workplace conduct. We'll see you tomorrow, the worker said, eyes scanning the apartment's neat interior. After she left, Mason's voice was small. Aunt Lila? Everything's okay, she said firmly, pulling him into a hug. We're going to handle this together, just like always. But as she held him, her mind was racing. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. Someone was trying to take away the person she loved most in the world. She looked at their small kitchen. Photos on the fridge, homework on the table, the radio still playing her grandmother's favorite songs. She'd fought too hard for this little piece of security to let anyone destroy it now. The morning sunlight filled Lila's living room as she straightened the stack of documents on the coffee table. Mason sat beside her on the couch, his school uniform neat, his expression serious beyond his years. At exactly 9 a.m., the CPS worker, Ms. Thompson, according to her badge, arrived with a leather portfolio and clipboard. Thank you for meeting with me, Ms. Thompson said, settling into the armchair. I'd like to review Mason's living situation and your guardianship arrangements. Lila nodded, gesturing to the organized files. I've prepared everything. First, here are Mason's school records. Perfect attendance, honor roll 3 quarters running. His teacher's contact information is attached. Ms. Thompson made notes as Lila walked her through their daily routine. Breakfast at 7, homework check before TV time, Sunday meal prep together, weekly calls with his therapist. These are our neighbor's reference letters, Lila continued, passing over a folder. Mrs. Chen from 4B has known us 5 years. She watches Mason if I work late. The Rodriguez family across the hall included a photo from Mason's birthday party last month. Mason spoke up quietly. Aunt Lila helps me with math. We have a calendar for everything. I'm never alone or scared. Ms. Thompson's expression softened slightly as she reviewed the meticulous guardianship paperwork. You seem very organized, Ms. Carter. We'll conduct standard background checks and follow up within 72 hours. After she left, Lila hugged Mason tight. You did great, baby. Now I need you to be extra responsible today. Straight to Mrs. Chen's after school, okay? I have some important meetings. Downtown, Mrs. Hargrove's office was modest but dignified. Worn leather chairs, law books lining the walls, a small Black Lives Matter poster beside her civil rights credentials. The attorney listened intently, her dark eyes sharp behind reading glasses as Lila detailed everything. The kneeling demands, Theo's shout, the handbook photos, the retaliatory suspension, and the CPS complaint's suspicious timing. Julian Remington, Mrs. Hargrove said finally, removing her glasses. He's used similar tactics before. NDAs, smear campaigns, weaponizing bureaucracy against whistleblowers. But he's never faced someone as careful as you. She smiled. Those timestamp photos and server logs matter. Now, here's our plan. She outlined 3 priorities on a legal pad. First, we protect your guardianship of Mason. I'm filing for an emergency hearing to block any interference. Second, we preserve evidence before it disappears. I'll draft a litigation hold letter to Remington's lawyers tonight. Third, we prepare for more retaliation, because men like him escalate when challenged. What about the NDA? Lila asked. Don't sign anything, Mrs. Hargrove said firmly. We'll get affidavits from Elena and other staff about the protocols. And I'm scheduling a meeting with Aisha Benton. She's a guardian ad litem who can document Theo's statements independently. Lila's phone buzzed. An email from Remington HR. Final notice. Sign enclosed NDA within 24 hours, or face immediate termination for cause. All claims of misconduct will be vigorously defended. Mrs. Hargrove read it and snorted. Predictable. They're scared of what you can prove. She handed Lila a yellow sticky notepad. Write yourself a reminder of why you're fighting. Lila wrote 3 words. No more kneeling. She placed it carefully on top of her growing case file. The rest of the day passed in a blur of paperwork and phone calls. Elena confirmed the staff handbook's version number and date stamp. 3 former housekeepers agreed to provide statements. Mrs. Hargrove's clerk notarized everything. By twilight, Lila stood at her apartment window, watching the streetlights flicker to life along their quiet block. She called Elena one last time. Found my old copy of the handbook, Elena said. Version 12.4, dated January 15th. The kneeling protocol is on page 23, right where you photographed it. Thank you, Lila said softly, for everything. De nada, Mija. We'll tell the truth together. Lila touched the sticky note on her folder, tracing the words. The truth was simple. Julian had demanded she kneel. Theo had shouted, "Stop!" The evidence existed in multiple places. And now Julian wasn't just trying to silence her. He was trying to destroy her whole life. She looked at Mason's backpack by the door, his science project poster drying on the kitchen table. This apartment, this stability, this family they'd built, she'd fight with everything she had to protect it. The phone rang again. Mrs. Hargrove, with tomorrow's battle plan. Leela straightened her shoulders and picked up her pen. The real fight was just beginning. The courthouse's marble halls echoed with footsteps as Lila and Mrs. Hargrove made their way to the clerk's office. Morning light streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Lila clutched her expanding folder of evidence, now labeled with color-coded tabs. Emergency motions get priority, Mrs. Hargrove explained, her sensible heels clicking steadily. We're filing for two things: protection of your guardianship rights and preservation of evidence. At the filing window, Mrs. Hargrove handed over the motions with practiced efficiency. Lila watched as she highlighted key passages for the clerk: the timeline of retaliation, the sudden CPS report, the demand for documents before they could disappear. "Here's my timeline," Lila said, passing her a neat handwritten account. "Everything from the kneeling demand to when CPS showed up. I included timestamps for the handbook photos." Mrs. Hargrove nodded approvingly as she reviewed the detailed notes. "This is exactly what we need. Clear, factual, chronological. Judges appreciate precision." They settled into chairs by a window to organize the exhibits. Lila's phone buzzed. An email from Aisha Benton confirming she could meet with Theo next week through proper channels. "Good," Mrs. Hargrove said. "Aisha's respected by the courts. She'll document Theo's statements carefully, without pressure." A commotion near the courthouse steps drew their attention. Through the window, they spotted a small camera crew setting up, led by a sleek woman in a red blazer, Sarah Mills, Remington's PR director. "Here we go," Mrs. Hargrove muttered. "They're hoping to provoke a reaction they can use against you." Sure enough, as they exited the building, Sarah Mills stepped forward with a microphone. "Ms. Carter, care to comment on allegations you manipulated a grieving child for personal gain?" Leila kept walking, face calm, but Mrs. Hargrove stopped and turned. "Ms. Mills, any attempt to harass my client will be documented and added to our court filing. Would you like to provide your business card for service of process?" The camera lowered slightly. Sarah's smile tightened. "We're simply seeking comment on a matter of public interest." "Then you can direct all inquiries to my office," Mrs. Hargrove replied pleasantly. "I'm sure Mr. Remington's counsel would prefer to handle this through proper channels." Back in her car, Lila checked her encrypted email. Darren had sent a technical report showing the stop audio file's digital fingerprint and confirmation it was mirrored to the trust server, all in clean, admissible language. "This is solid," Mrs. Hargrove said, reviewing it. "Darren knows how to document a chain of custody." When Lila arrived home that afternoon, a folded note waited under her door. The careful handwriting belonged to Mr. Lawson, her elderly neighbor. "Dear Lila, I heard the CPS visit yesterday. In my 40 years here, I've never known a more devoted guardian or kinder neighbor. You've helped me with groceries, taught Mason to respect his elders, and bring stability to our floor. I'm happy to testify about your character any time. We look after our own here. Arthur Lawson." Lila blinked back tears, touching the paper. Mr. Lawson had been a constant presence since she and Mason moved in, always ready with a kind word or simple favor, watching out for Mason when she worked late. Her phone rang. The judge's clerk. "Ms. Carter, Judge Chen has scheduled a preliminary hearing for Thursday at 9 a.m. Discovery conference to follow next week." "Thank you," Lila said, marking it in her calendar. She immediately texted Elena and Darren with the date, then stepped across the hall to Mr. Lawson's door. The old machinist answered quickly, his lined face concerned. "You got my note?" "Yes, thank you," Lila said softly. "It means more than you know." He squeezed her hand. "You stand your ground, young lady. Some fights need fighting." Inside her apartment, Lila added Mr. Lawson's note to her case file. 48 hours until the hearing. She reviewed Mrs. Hargrove's instructions. Rest well, dress professionally. Speak only when asked. Let the evidence tell the story. Mason's after-school chatter drifted from his room where he worked on homework. The familiar sounds of their building floated up. Mrs. Chen's cooking smells. The Rodriguez kids practicing piano. Mr. Lawson's radio playing old jazz. This was home. This was worth protecting. She opened her laptop to type up meeting notes while the timeline was fresh. The courthouse halls, Sarah Mills's ambush, Mr. Lawson's steady support, every detail mattered. 2 days to prepare. 2 days until they faced Julian Remington's legal team. 2 days to show the truth still carried weight. The fluorescent lights hummed in the Union Hall's meeting room as Lila helped Elena arrange folding chairs in a circle. Steam rose from coffee urns on a scratched table near the entrance, where a simple sign-in sheet lay next to a stack of statement forms. 7 years I've worked there, Elena said, straightening a chair. The kneeling started small, just special occasions, then daily. Her voice carried years of stored hurt. Margaret Chen, a former housekeeper who'd left Remington's employ 7 years ago, arrived first. Her gray hair was neat, her posture still proud. When I see it on the news, my hands shake. He made us say, I am grateful for this opportunity before getting our paychecks. 2 more ex-employees filtered in, James Washington, a former groundskeeper, and Rosa Diaz, who'd worked in the kitchen. They each carried notebooks filled with dates and details. Tips disappeared if we didn't bow and thank him properly, Rosa recalled, her fingers twisting a tissue. Christmas bonuses came with mandatory gratitude ceremonies. Lila recorded everything, using her phone to photograph the handwritten accounts. Elena demonstrated the expected bow, explaining how Julian had gradually increased the demanded depth of genuflection. First, just a head nod, she said. Then from the waist. Finally, full kneeling. Always with that same cold smile. The door opened again, admitting 2 men in pressed shirts carrying notepads. We're from the City Chronicle, the taller one announced, covering the labor dispute. Something felt off about their eagerness to photograph the sign-in sheet. When Elena politely asked for press credentials, the shorter man lunged for the papers. Hey! Lila moved to block him. Those are private statements. The taller man's face twisted. Know your place, he spat, shoving Lila's shoulder hard enough to make her stumble. His words carried an ugly racial slur that made the room go still. Elena already had her phone up, recording. The Union Hall regulars, retired dock workers, and hospital staff rose from their seats. They formed a quiet wall between the men and the group. Police have been called, announced Mr. O. Rodriguez, the union secretary. And we have cameras in the parking lot. The 2 men backed toward the door, but not before James Washington captured a clear photo of their retreating figures and their car's license plate. You okay? Elena hurried to Lila's side, still filming. I'm fine. Lila straightened her jacket, her shoulder aching. Just glad they didn't get the statements. Darren arrived just as the police were taking descriptions of the men. He set up his laptop, creating a simple system to digitally preserve their testimonies. See this string of numbers and letters? He pointed to a long code on his screen. It's called a hash, like a digital fingerprint. If anyone tries to alter these statements later, the hash won't match. That proves tampering. The group gathered around, watching as Darren demonstrated how to save and verify their documents. Even Margaret Chen, who admitted technology made her nervous, practiced the steps. Now, you each have proof your original statement hasn't been changed, Darren explained. Keep the hash codes safe. Mrs. Hargrove arrived as they were finishing, her face tight with concern when she heard about the confrontation. The assault footage strengthens our case, she said, reviewing Elena's video. It shows the lengths they'll go to suppress testimony. One by one, the workers signed properly witnessed statements, their stories aligned, the gradual escalation of demands, the manipulation of pay and bonuses, the careful cultivation of fear. Remember, Mrs. Hargrove advised, stick to exactly what you saw and experienced. Dates, times, specific words used. Let the pattern speak for itself. Later, As Elena drove Lila home, streetlights flickered past in steady rhythm. I knew others had stories, Lila said quietly. But hearing them all together, she touched her bruised shoulder. That's why they tried to steal the sign-in sheet, Elena replied. They're scared of us standing together. I'm scared too, Lila admitted, but less scared than this morning. All those voices saying, "Me too," it helps. Her apartment was dark except for a small lamp. Mason lay sprawled on the couch, math homework scattered across his chest, one sock dangling off his foot. Lila carefully gathered the papers and covered him with the soft blanket her grandmother had crocheted. She touched his forehead gently, remembering the determination in Margaret Chen's eyes, the steady recording of Elena's phone, the protective circle of union workers. Different kinds of courage, all aimed at the same truth. Some things were worth fighting for. The Child Advocacy Center's playroom walls were painted in soft blues and yellows. Scattered toys waited on low shelves. Wooden blocks, stuffed animals, and fresh boxes of crayons. Aisha Benton arranged the art supplies on a kid-sized table while watching Theo through the observation window. The 6-year-old stood in the hallway, holding his father's hand. Julian Remington wore an expertly tailored suit that seemed out of place among the cheerful murals and alphabet posters. "Remember what we discussed, son," Julian said, smoothing Theo's hair. "Ms. Benton just wants to talk." Aisha noted how Theo's shoulders tensed at his father's touch. When the receptionist led Theo into the playroom, Julian remained in the lobby, checking his phone with controlled impatience. "Hi, Theo," Aisha said warmly, sitting cross-legged on the carpet. "Would you like to draw with me?" Theo nodded, settling at the small table. He selected a black crayon first, carefully outlining a tall figure with spiky hair like his father's. Next came a smaller figure on its knees, Lila, in her navy uniform. His movements grew more intense as he grabbed the red crayon, drawing a bold stop sign beside them. "Can you tell me about your picture?" Aisha asked gently. Theo added a final detail, a rectangular shape on his wrist, complete with a tiny cloud floating above it. He pointed to the kneeling figure, then shook his head emphatically. "The person kneeling. You didn't like seeing that?" Aisha suggested. Another headshake. Theo circled the stop sign repeatedly with the red crayon, pressing harder with each loop. "You said stop when you saw this happening?" Theo nodded, then tapped the drawn smartwatch and made a swooping gesture toward the cloud. Aisha made careful notes about his consistent focus on these elements: the kneeling, the stop sign, the watch's connection to the cloud. Through several more drawings, the same elements appeared. Lila kneeling, the stop sign always circled in urgent red, the watch always present. "Thank you for sharing your drawings with me," Aisha said as their session ended. She'd need to request formal access to those smartwatch logs. Across town that afternoon, Lila straightened the already tidy living room while waiting for the CPS follow-up visit. Mason's homework schedule was posted on the fridge, along with his recent math test marked with a bright A. A knock at the door revealed Mr. Lawson, her elderly neighbor, carrying a worn leather notebook. "Thought I'd stop by," he said, settling into an armchair. "Been keeping track of when Mason comes by after school. 3 days a week, regular as clockwork. Always does his homework at my kitchen table while I make him a sandwich. Mr. Lawson, you didn't have to." "Course I did. Good neighbors look out for each other." He patted the notebook. "Got every date written down, what time he arrived, what he ate. Even saved the thank-you note he wrote when I helped with his science project." The CPS worker arrived moments later. Ms. Torres, the same one from yesterday. She noticed Mr. Lawson's presence with raised eyebrows. "Just dropping off my records," he explained, handing over his notebook. "Been Mason's after-school backup since Lila got guardianship. Fine young man she's raising. Ms. Torres reviewed the detailed logs, noting the consistent routine. She toured the apartment again, checking the well-stocked fridge and Mason's organized room. The preliminary report is positive, she said finally. We'll need supervisor review, but I'm seeing appropriate structure and support here. After she left, Lila checked her mail. A court notice confirmed tomorrow morning's hearing on evidence preservation and the restraining order against guardianship interference. Her hands shook slightly as she read the formal language. That evening, fluorescent lights hummed over a corner booth at Jerry's diner. Lila stirred her coffee while Elena reviewed their written statements. Darren arrived with a manila envelope, sliding into the vinyl seat. I've simplified the technical details, he said, spreading out several printed pages. See these columns? They show when Theo's watch uploaded the audio, with matching timestamps from the house system and trust server. Will the judge understand all this? Lila asked. That's why I made this summary. Darren pointed to a clearly formatted timeline. No technical jargon, just when things happened, and how we can prove the files weren't altered. Elena squeezed Lila's hand. We've got the handbook photos, the staff statements, and now this. Real proof, not just our word against his. And Theo's drawings, Lila added softly, remembering the little boy's quiet determination with his crayons. Those tell the truth, too. They worked through their statements again, making sure every detail was clear and supported. The diner's regular dinner crowd came and went as they prepared for tomorrow's hearing, their coffee growing cold in sturdy ceramic mugs. The family courthouse buzzed with morning activity as Lila smoothed her navy blazer, a thrift store find she'd carefully pressed the night before. Mrs. Hargrove stood beside her, arranging documents with practiced efficiency. Across the aisle, 3 lawyers in expensive suits represented Julian Remington, who had chosen not to appear in person. All rise, the bailiff called as Judge Martinez entered. Her sharp eyes scanned the courtroom as everyone settled back into their seats. We're here on Carter versus Remington, Judge Martinez began, regarding a temporary restraining order and evidence preservation. She turned to Hargrove. You may proceed. Mrs. Hargrove approached the podium with measured steps. Your Honor, we seek 2 immediate protections. First, to prevent interference with Ms. Carter's established guardianship of her nephew Mason, and second, to preserve crucial evidence of workplace policies at the Remington residence. She lifted the first exhibit, Lila's photos of the staff handbook. This document, dated and version-controlled, explicitly requires staff to perform what Mr. Remington called a courtesy protocol, forcing employees to kneel daily as a show of submission. The opposing counsel shifted in their seats as Hargrove continued. We have sworn affidavits from current and former staff members. She handed copies to the clerk. Elena Ortiz, senior housekeeper of 15 years, and 3 previous employees, all confirm this practice was mandatory, not voluntary. Lila watched the judge study the statements, her expression carefully neutral. Her heart pounded, but she kept her posture straight and calm. Furthermore, Hargrove continued, we submit this technical summary prepared by Mr. Remington's own IT administrator. She presented Darren's metadata report. It confirms the authenticity of an audio recording where Mr. Remington's son witnessed and objected to this ritual. One of Remington's lawyers stood. Objection, Your Honor. This alleged recording hasn't been authenticated by our experts. The metadata and server logs establish its provenance, Hargrove countered. And we have this. She played the Union Hall video on a laptop, showing Remington's men attempting to seize documents and shoving Lila. These are attempts to suppress evidence and intimidate witnesses, Hargrove stated firmly. And now, an anonymous complaint to CPS threatens Ms. Carter's guardianship of her nephew. Timing that cannot be coincidental. The lead counsel for Remington approached the podium next, his tone dismissive. "Your Honor, Ms. Carter is clearly seeking attention and financial gain. Any workplace protocols were completely voluntary. This is a disgruntled employee trying to exploit Mr. Remington's high profile and his son's grief." Lila felt her jaw tighten, but kept her expression neutral as the lawyer continued. "Furthermore, if Miss Carter found these policies objectionable, she was free to seek employment elsewhere. Instead, she's orchestrating a media circus." Judge Martinez held up her hand. "I've heard enough from both sides." She studied the documents for several long moments, while the courtroom held its breath. "I am granting a temporary order with the following provisions," she announced. "First, all employment records, handbooks, surveillance footage, and audio captures from the Remington residence must be preserved. Nothing is to be deleted, shredded, or altered." Lila released a careful breath as the judge continued. "Second, Mr. Remington and his representatives are prohibited from contacting Child Protective Services regarding Ms. Carter, except through proper legal channels. Any legitimate concerns must be addressed through counsel." The judge fixed Remington's lawyers with a stern look. "And third, Ms. Carter's guardianship of Mason Carter remains in place pending further review. There is no evidence supporting its disruption." She tapped her gavel. "This order remains in effect until our full hearing next month. We're adjourned." A few reporters scribbled notes in the back row as everyone stood. Outside the courtroom, a woman in a crisp suit approached Mrs. Hargrove quietly. "I'm with the City Oversight Committee," she said in low tones. "We're scheduling a televised hearing next week on labor practices. We'd like Ms. Carter to testify." Hargrove glanced at Lila, who nodded firmly. On the courthouse steps, morning sunlight warming her face, Lila pulled out her phone to call Mason. She smiled as his voice answered, bright with youth and energy. "Hey, kiddo," she said softly. "Good news. Everything's okay with us staying together." The judge made sure of it. "Really?" Mason's relief was clear even through the phone. "So nobody can mess with us?" "That's right. We're safe." She caught Mrs. Hargrove's eye. "I have to testify at another hearing next week, but we'll prepare for it starting today." "You've got this, Aunt Lila," Mason said, with complete confidence. Hargrove was already checking her calendar. "We should start preparing your testimony immediately. This televised hearing will reach a much wider audience." Leela squared her shoulders, feeling both the weight and the importance of what lay ahead. The temporary order was just the first step, but it was a crucial one. Proof that the truth could stand up against power when brought into the light. The City Hall chamber hummed with tension on the crisp morning. Over the last 7 days, Lila rehearsed testimony with Hargrove. Elena gathered more declarations, and Aisha finalized her notes on Theo. Now it's the morning of the televised hearing. Lila sat at the witness table, her navy blazer crisp, her hands steady on the microphone. Local news cameras tracked her every move as she faced the City Oversight Committee. "Please state your name for the record," the committee chair said. "Lila Carter, Ms. Carter, can you describe the daily ritual Mr. Remington required of his staff?" Lila spoke clearly, her voice carrying through the packed chamber. Every morning at 8 a.m., staff would line up in the foyer. Mr. Remington would select one person to kneel on the marble floor as a sign of respect. Most days, he chose me. And this was mandatory? Yes. The staff handbook called it the courtesy protocol. Missing it meant write-ups or lost wages. She described the cold marble, the security guard's watchful eye, the way other staff had to avert their gaze. Her measured tone made the humiliation even starker. Elena testified next, her silver hair neat under the harsh lights. "I've worked there 15 years. The kneeling started after Mrs. Remington passed. Before that, she never would have allowed it." The committee members leaned forward as Elena described watching newer staff members break down in tears after sessions, of Julian's comments about knowing their place. Then came the moment everyone waited for. The large screen lit up with Aisha's pre-recorded interview with Theo. The 6-year-old sat in a bright playroom, his dinosaur shirt wrinkled. "Can you tell us what you saw that morning, Theo?" Aisha asked gently. Theo's voice was soft, but clear. He made her kneel. "I said stop." "Why did you say stop?" "Because Mommy said we don't make people do that. It's not nice." He looked down at his hands. "I miss Mommy." The chamber fell completely silent. Committee members dabbed their eyes. On social media, a domestic workers' defense fund started trending as donations poured in. During the lunch break, Hargrove showed Lila her phone. "The Workers' Fund has raised over $100,000 already. People are finally seeing the truth." For one shining moment, it felt like justice was within reach. Lila allowed herself to smile as reporters asked for comments and supporters patted her shoulder. But by late afternoon, everything changed. First came the slick video from Remington's PR team. It featured audio experts claiming the stop recording showed signs of manipulation. Computer graphics demonstrated how voice synthesis could fake a child's speech. Social media floods with doubt. Then the corporate court ruling hit. A judge granted Remington's request to classify the staff handbook as proprietary information. The NDAs were temporarily enforced, blocking Elena and others from sharing handbook details publicly. "It's a delay tactic," Hargrove assured Lila as they left City Hall. "We'll appeal." But Hargrove never finished the sentence. She grabbed her chest, face gray, and collapsed. As paramedics loaded her into an ambulance, her blood pressure was dangerously high. Lila barely had time to process this when her phone buzzed. The CPS worker's voice was apologetic but firm. "Ms. Carter, we've received concerning new information. I have a temporary removal order for Mason pending clarification of these issues." "What new information?" Lila's voice shook. "Everything was fine last week." "I'm sorry, but I can't discuss the specifics. We'll be there within the hour." Lila rushed home to find Mason playing video games, unaware his world was about to shift. She helped him pack a small bag, trying to explain through numb lips that he had to stay with a foster family temporarily. "But you said we were safe," he whispered, as the CPS worker led him away. "You promised." Now, close to midnight, Lila sat in her dark kitchen. The apartment felt wrong without Mason's presence. No homework spread across the table, no teenage boy raids on the fridge, no sound of his video games. She walked to his room and picked up the hoodie he'd left draped across his desk chair. The fabric still smelled like his body spray as she carefully folded it and placed it on his empty bed. Back in the kitchen, Lila pulled out her folder of evidence and set it on the table. Her hand found a pen in the darkness. The day's events tried to crush her spirit. Hargrove in the hospital, Mason gone. The truth twisted into lies. But sitting there in the quiet dark, Lila whispered words that were both a promise and a declaration. "I am not done." Lila's kitchen light cast a soft glow as she spread her documents across the worn table. Her fingers traced each page methodically, the way her grandmother had taught her to check seams when sewing. Every detail mattered. The staff handbook pages lay before her like puzzle pieces. She'd stared at them so many times, but now, running on coffee and determination at 1 a.m., something caught her eye. There, in tiny text along the bottom margin, Rever 2023 Q2 V4.1. Print code, REM HR 0422. She grabbed her phone, zooming in on the photos she'd taken. Each page had similar codes. Flipping through her work emails, she found quarterly notices about updated handbooks. The dates matched perfectly with the footer codes. "Receipts," she whispered, remembering the vendor invoices she'd filed when covering for Elena during inventory week. She opened her work folder, and there they were. Quarterly printing orders from HR Supply Corp, each with matching version numbers. The paper trail was like a chain, link by link. No one could claim these were fake or tampered with. The versions progressed logically over years, each connecting to the next. Her phone showed 3:47 a.m. when she finally lay down, but sleep wouldn't come. By 6 a.m., she was dressed and texting Elena to meet before the morning shift change. The autumn air was sharp as Lila waited near the service entrance of the Remington townhouse. Elena appeared, her gray hair neat under a wool cap. "I think I found something," Lila said quietly, showing Elena the handbook codes. Elena's eyes widened. "Wait, there's more." During the renovation last year, we moved lots of old files to a safe in the back service corridor. I remember seeing protocol memos there. "Can we access it?" Elena held up her keycard. "Service areas are common spaces. We have the preservation order. We're not going anywhere private." They timed their entry between shift changes, when the halls were quietest. Elena's keycard beeped green at the service door. The familiar smell of cleaning supplies and laundry soap filled the air. They'd made it halfway to the old corridor when heavy footsteps approached. A security contractor, not one of the regulars, blocked their path. His badge read, "Matthews Security Services." "Staff areas are restricted during changeover," he barked, looking directly at Lila. "You people need to learn to follow rules." Elena held up her keycard. "We have access." And a court order to preserve documents. The guard stepped closer, towering over Elena. "Hand over your phones. No recordings allowed." He reached for Elena's phone, but Lila moved between them, her own phone already recording. Section 4 of the Preservation Order prohibits interference with documentation, Lila stated clearly. "We're in a common area during normal hours with valid access." "Listen here, girl," the guard started, his face twisting with an ugly sneer. Elena's voice cut through, steady on speakerphone. 911, what's your emergency?" The guard's demeanor shifted instantly. He stepped back, muttering about checking with supervision before retreating down the hall. Elena's hands trembled as she led the way to the old corridor. "I haven't been this far back since the renovation," she said. The safe was there, just as she remembered, tucked behind a supply shelf. The combination hadn't changed. Elena's institutional memory proved invaluable again. Inside, manila folders held years of staff documents. They worked efficiently, photographing everything in place. Outdated handbooks with progression of the courtesy protocol, payroll forms where staff acknowledged reading the requirements, and, most damning, a memo on Remington letterhead signed by Julian himself. "Implementation of kneeling to maintain the cultural standard," Lila read aloud, careful to capture every word in her photos. "Effective immediately and non-negotiable." They documented everything methodically. Dates, times, positions of documents, nothing disturbed or removed. Lila added detailed notes to each photo before sending the entire package to Hargrove's office email with timestamp verification. The morning sun was bright when they finally emerged from the service entrance. Elena's hands were still shaking from the confrontation. Lila held them steady between her own. "You're the bravest person I know," Lila said softly. Elena squeezed back. "No, Majita, you are. But we're stronger together." They walked to Elena's car, shoulders straight despite their exhaustion. The evidence was secure. Tomorrow morning, they would take everything to the district attorney's office. "Get some rest," Elena said as Lila got out at her bus stop. "Tomorrow we show them what truth looks like." Lila nodded, her folder clutched tight. The morning air felt cleaner somehow, despite everything still ahead. The fluorescent lights of the district attorney's intake area hummed overhead as Lila smoothed her blazer and approached the desk. Her folder felt heavy with evidence, each page carefully organized the way her grandmother had taught her to arrange important papers. "I have an appointment with D.A. Gray," she said, presenting her ID. The clerk nodded, already expecting her. "Follow me." District Attorney Celeste Gray's office was orderly, but lived in, with stacks of case files and a wall of legal texts. The DA herself sat behind a broad desk, her silver-streaked hair pulled back severely, reading glasses perched on her nose. "Miss Carter," Gray said, gesturing to a chair. "Tell me what you've brought." Lila laid out the documents methodically. First, photos from this morning showing the staff protocol documents stored in the Remington House safe. Each page has version numbers matching quarterly updates and vendor invoices. Gray examined the images with a prosecutor's eye. "Walk me through the timeline." The kneeling requirement started years ago. "Here's the original memo signed by Julian Remington himself." Lila pointed to the letterhead. "The staff handbook versions show how it evolved into official policy." "And the audio file from the child's outburst?" Lila opened Darren's technical summary. The original file was automatically uploaded to 2 locations, the house server and a backup connected to Mrs. Remington's trust. Both copies exist from before any publicity. Gray's phone buzzed. "Perfect timing. Your IT contact is here." Darren entered, his tie slightly askew despite his careful demeanor. He carried a laptop and several folders. "I can verify the file authenticity," he said, setting up his computer. "The trust server is managed by Third Valley Data Vaults. They maintain immutable logs, meaning records can't be altered after creation." "Show me," Gray said, leaning forward. Darren pulled up screens of technical data. "Here's the original file hash from the morning upload. It matches the copy on the trust server exactly. I've prepared a sworn declaration explaining the technical details in layman's terms. What about claims the audio was faked? Impossible given the timestamp and backup architecture. The file existed hours before anyone outside knew about the incident." Darren's voice held quiet certainty. "Mrs. Remington specifically required independent backups after a previous incident. It's in the trust IT contract." Gray's phone lit up again. "Excuse me, this is relevant." She put the call on speaker. "Go ahead, Ms. Benton." Aisha's voice filled the room. "I'm forwarding my report on Theo's statements. He's been completely consistent in multiple sessions, showing no signs of coaching. I'm also sending a formal request for limited smartwatch log access through proper channels." "Very thorough," Gray said. "Anything else?" "Yes. I've documented his emotional responses when discussing the incident. They align with genuine trauma recall, not rehearsed behavior." After ending the call, Gray studied the growing stack of evidence. Her fingers drummed once on her desk before she reached a decision. "I'm opening a criminal investigation," she said. "Witness intimidation, attempted evidence tampering, possibly more." She pulled out official forms. "I'll draft subpoenas for Remington Corporation, the trust's IT vendor, and that security contractor." "Mrs. Hargrove is still in the hospital," Lila said, "but she's stable." As if on cue, Lila's phone lit up with a video call. Hargrove's face appeared, tired but alert in her hospital bed. "I'm following everything," Hargrove said. "My colleague James Chen will handle the next court appearance. He's fully briefed." She managed a small smile. "You've done outstanding work, Lila. We'll coordinate with your office on document production," Gray told Hargrove. To Lila, she added, "I'll need you available for follow-up questions." "Of course," Lila said. Gray began signing the subpoenas with swift, practiced strokes. "These will go out immediately. Corporate counsel usually responds fastest when their trading day is disrupted." The afternoon light was fading when Lila finally left the DA's building. Her phone buzzed with a text from Elena. "Breaking news! DA subpoenas just landed. Remington Board called emergency meeting for tomorrow a.m." Lila looked up at the city skyline, where dark clouds were finally breaking apart after days of rain. The air felt clearer, like it does after a storm passes through and washes everything clean. She checked the time, just enough left to pick up Mason's favorite takeout before heading home. One day at a time, she thought. One truth at a time. The press room buzzed with anticipation as journalists settled into their seats. Camera lights blazed, and microphones crowded the podium where District Attorney Celeste Gray would speak. Lila sat in the back row between Elena and Darren, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Gray strode to the podium exactly on time, her silver hair gleaming under the lights. She adjusted her glasses and began without preamble. This morning, my office launched a formal investigation into potential criminal conduct at Remington Corporation, she announced, her voice clear and measured. We are examining evidence of witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and tampering with evidence in connection with recent allegations of worker abuse. Cameras clicked rapidly as reporters scribbled notes. Gray continued, "We have served multiple subpoenas for documents and electronic records. The investigation will focus on systematic attempts to suppress evidence and intimidate witnesses through various means, including misuse of non-disclosure agreements and apparent manipulation of social services reports." A reporter's hand shot up. "Are you referring to the viral video claiming the stop recording was fake?" "We have conclusive technical evidence regarding the authenticity of that recording," Gray replied. "The attempt to discredit it may constitute criminal obstruction." Another voice called out, "What about the allegations of forced kneeling rituals?" "We're reviewing extensive documentation of workplace policies spanning several years," Gray said. "Worker intimidation and civil rights violations fall within our investigative scope." As if on cue, phones throughout the room began buzzing. Lila's screen lit up with a news alert. "Breaking! Remington Corp Board suspends CEO Julian Remington, pending criminal investigation." Elena squeezed Lila's hand as more alerts followed. "City Hall freezes permits on Remington Luxury Development," and "Remington shares plunge as board names interim CEO." Gray acknowledged the breaking news with a slight nod. "We will follow the evidence wherever it leads, regardless of position or power. No one is above the law." After the press conference, Lila barely had time to process before rushing to family court. The afternoon sun slanted through tall windows as she entered the familiar courtroom. James Chen, Hargrove's colleague, was already there arranging documents. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Lila nodded, smoothing her skirt as she sat. The judge entered, and proceedings began immediately. Chen presented the new evidence methodically. The documented chain of custody for the stop recording, the historical staff handbooks showing the evolution of the kneeling requirement, and verification of the trust server logs. Aisha Benton took the stand next, displaying Theo's crayon drawings. In multiple sessions, Theo consistently depicted the same scene, she explained. The red stop sign appears in every version, along with the kneeling figure he identifies as Ms. Carter. His emotional responses align with genuine trauma recall, not coached testimony. The CPS supervisor rose next, her face drawn. "Your Honor, in light of the DA's investigation and new evidence, we withdraw any objection to Mason Carter's placement with his aunt. Furthermore," she turned to face Lila directly, "I want to formally apologize for our agency's role in temporarily removing him. We acted on external pressure without proper verification, and we are launching an internal review of our procedures." The judge leaned forward. "Given the evidence before me, I find absolutely no basis for continuing Mason's removal. I order his immediate return to Ms. Carter's custody, with CPS to conduct only routine follow-up visits on a standard schedule." Lila pressed her hands to her mouth, tears threatening to spill. Chen patted her shoulder as the judge continued, "I want the record to reflect that Ms. Carter has demonstrated exemplary care for her nephew throughout this ordeal. This court commends her dedication to both truth and family." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of paperwork and signatures. As sunset painted the sky orange, Leela stood in her apartment kitchen, preparing Mason's favorite mac and cheese. The door buzzer sounded. She ran to open it, and Mason burst through, backpack bouncing. "Auntie Lee!" He crashed into her arms as she knelt to hug him. "I missed you so much," she whispered into his hair. "Can we watch that funny movie tonight? The one with the penguins?" Mason asked, already heading for their worn but comfortable couch. "Absolutely." Lila grabbed their dinner and settled beside him. The familiar animated characters filled the screen, and Mason's laughter, the best sound in the world, soon filled their home. During a quiet moment, Lila snapped a quick photo of them together on the couch, Mason's head resting against her shoulder as he munched his dinner. She sent it to Elena and Darren with a single word: home. The movie played on, but Lila barely watched it. She was too busy memorizing this moment, the weight of Mason beside her, the taste of comfort food, the simple joy of being together in their own space again. Here, in their small apartment with the mismatched furniture and Mason's artwork on the fridge, was everything that mattered. 1 week later, Lila stood in the bustling courthouse hallway, watching a stream of reporters crowd around D.A. Gray. The past 7 days had brought an avalanche of evidence: server logs from subpoenas, sworn statements from former staff, and detailed financial records showing the systematic nature of worker intimidation at Remington Corp. The defendant has agreed to plead guilty to multiple counts of obstruction of justice and evidence tampering, Gray announced, her voice carrying over the crowd. This includes attempts to destroy records and the coordinated campaign to discredit authentic evidence. Lila felt Elena's steadying presence beside her as they listened. The terms of Julian's plea agreement were comprehensive: immediate resignation as CEO, substantial restitution payments, and 2 years of court-supervised community service focused on worker dignity programs. Additionally, Gray continued, the civil settlement establishes a $10 million domestic workers' dignity fund, overseen by an independent board. This will support training, legal aid, and emergency assistance for household employees throughout the city. Reporters' hands shot up, but Gray wasn't finished. The security contractor who assaulted Ms. Carter has been indicted on separate charges of assault and civil rights violations. Let me be clear: physical intimidation and racial harassment have no place in any workplace. After the announcement, Lila retreated to a quiet conference room with Hargrove, who had recovered enough to attend key proceedings. Her cane tapped softly on the floor as she settled into a chair. "The city council vote is scheduled for this afternoon," Hargrove said, spreading out papers. "The new ordinance will explicitly ban degrading workplace protocols and limit NDAs that hide abuse. Your testimony helped shape that language." Lila nodded, thinking of the dozens of interview requests filling her inbox. She'd declined most, agreeing to one thoughtful reporter who wanted to focus on policy reforms rather than sensational details. "How are you holding up?" Hargrove asked gently. "Better now that Mason's settled back into his routine," Lila replied. "He made honor roll this quarter, you know. Didn't miss a single assignment during everything." Their conversation was interrupted by Darren's arrival. He carried a folder of final documentation for the whistleblower protection agreement that would shield him from retaliation. "The new board wants to completely overhaul the IT security protocols," he reported. "They're implementing proper oversight of surveillance systems and data retention." Elena joined them next, practically glowing. The worker-owned staffing agency she now helped lead was partnering with the city's expanded worker center. We're creating actual career paths, she explained. Benefits, training, advancement opportunities. Everything domestic staff should have had all along. They gathered around blueprints spread across the conference table. Plans for the new community center that would rise partly funded by settlement money. The former Remington property had been redesigned to include classroom space, counseling offices, and a daycare center. The worker training classroom will be ready for the first certification course next month, Elena said, pointing to a bright corner room. We're starting with workplace rights and safety. Lila traced the outline of the classroom with her finger, remembering the cold marble floor where she once had to kneel. Now that space would help ensure no one else faced similar humiliation. A text from Mason lit up her phone. Good luck at the meeting. Made cookies with Mrs. Lopez for when you get home. Attached was a slightly blurry photo of chocolate chip cookies cooling on their neighbor's rack. He's really thriving, Hargrove observed with a smile. We all are, Lila said quietly. Different kind of strength when you're standing up for what's right. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows as they reviewed final details for next week's ribbon-cutting ceremony. Construction crews were already installing the center's sign, Community Justice and Worker Dignity Center. Darren checked his phone. The council vote just passed, unanimously. The new Workplace Protection Ordinance takes effect in 30 days. Elena wiped away a tear. My daughter wants to intern at the center this summer. Says she wants to learn how to help people stand up for themselves. Hargrove's cane clicked against the floor as she walked to the window overlooking the construction site. Workers in hard hats moved purposefully below, transforming what had been a symbol of power into a place of empowerment. Mark your calendars, she said. Ribbon cutting is exactly 1 week from today. The mayor and city council will attend, but the real guests of honor are the domestic workers who've signed up for our first training cohort. Lila joined her at the window, watching the afternoon light glint off the center's new windows. The building seemed to shine with possibility. Should we head down and check the classroom setup? Elena suggested. The contractor wants to review the audiovisual installation. Together they gathered their things, ready to continue the day's work of building something better than what had been torn down. 1 week later, sunlight streamed through the freshly cleaned windows of the Community Justice and Worker Dignity Center's main classroom. The scent of new paint and coffee mingled in the air as people filed in, finding seats among the neat rows of chairs that volunteers had assembled over the weekend. Lila smoothed her blazer and checked her note cards one last time. Mason had helped her practice the speech last night, timing her with his phone and giving a thumbs up when she got the pacing right. The room filled steadily with familiar faces, seniors from the neighborhood, domestic workers who'd supported the cause, local reporters with their cameras ready. D.A. Gray arrived early, speaking quietly with Hargrove near the podium. Elena bustled around, making sure everyone had programs and refreshments, while Darren did a final check of the audiovisual system he'd helped install. Aisha Benton slipped in through a side door, carrying a folder of completed guardianship paperwork that officially closed any lingering questions about Mason's placement. The chairs are perfect, Elena whispered to Lila, squeezing her hand. Remember when we used to line up on marble floors? Different kind of gathering now, Lila replied, watching Mr. Lawson help Mrs. Lopez find a seat in the front row. Their elderly neighbors had brought homemade cookies, determined to make the event feel like a true community celebration. A small commotion at the entrance drew their attention. Theo's new caregiver, carefully vetted and kind-faced, ushered him into the room. The 6-year-old's eyes lit up when he spotted Lila. He broke free and ran toward her, dinosaur sneakers flashing. "Lila! Look at my new shoes," he called out, then stumbled slightly as he reached her. His left shoelace had come completely untied. Without hesitation or shame, Lila knelt down beside him. This time it was her choice. a simple act of care for a child who needed help. Her fingers moved efficiently over the laces as the room fell quiet. "Thank you," Theo whispered, his small hand finding hers. He squeezed gently, the way he used to when seeking comfort after his mother died. "You always tie them just right." Applause burst out spontaneously, starting with Elena and rippling through the crowd. Lila stood, keeping hold of Theo's hand as she blinked back tears. The moment crystallized everything they'd fought for. Dignity, freely given, not demanded. At the podium, Lila's voice was clear and steady. "Welcome to your community center," she began. "This space exists because people refused to stay silent, because we documented everything, because we stood together when those with power tried to stand on us." She outlined the center's initial programs: certification classes for domestic workers, legal aid clinics, childcare during training sessions. "Dignity isn't something that can be negotiated away," she continued. "It's not a privilege to be earned through kneeling. It's a right that belongs to every worker, every person." Elena stepped forward to announce the first round of scholarship recipients, 10 domestic workers who would receive full funding for certification courses. Among them was a young woman who reminded Lila of herself 6 months ago, determined to build a better life while caring for family. After the formal program ended, people lingered to chat and explore the center. Theo showed off his properly tied shoes to anyone who would look, while his caregiver smiled indulgently. Hargrove moved carefully through the crowd with her cane, stopping to speak with each scholarship recipient. "The security system is fully operational," Darren reported quietly to Lila. "Everything's recorded and backed up properly. No more hidden protocols or erased footage." D.A. Gray shook hands with community leaders, emphasizing that her office would maintain an open-door policy for worker complaints. Aisha collected contact information for families interested in the center's upcoming children's advocacy programs. As the afternoon wound down, Mason arrived from school clutching his science homework. He helped stack chairs and pack leftover cookies while Lila said goodbye to the last guests. The room slowly emptied, leaving behind a peaceful sense of purpose fulfilled. Later that evening, Lila and Mason stood at their apartment window, carefully planting an herb garden in small pots. "Basil for pasta," Mason declared, patting soil around tiny seedlings. "And mint for tea, like Grandma used to make." "What should we cook first when they grow?" Lila asked, labeling each pot with careful letters. "Something that needs lots of fresh herbs," Mason replied. "We can invite Elena and Mr. Lawson for dinner next week. And Mrs. Lopez, she showed me how to make enchiladas." The setting sun painted their kitchen in warm gold as they worked. Mason chattered about his science project on plant growth, while Lila listened to the comfortable rhythm of their restored routine. When the herbs were planted and watered, Lila opened a new scrapbook on the kitchen table. She carefully removed a small sticky note from her wallet. "No more kneeling," written in her determined handwriting from months ago. She placed it beside today's community center program, smoothing both pages flat. The apartment settled into nighttime quiet. Lila switched off lights as she made her final check. Doors locked, Mason's backpack ready for tomorrow, the new herbs positioned to catch morning sun. She paused at her nephew's doorway, watching his peaceful sleep. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.